Chapter 13. Just when the caterpillar thought the world was over, it became a butterfly. English proverb. Our family grows. What if I fall? Oh, but my darling, what if you fly? Erin Hansen. During my follow-up visit with my GP, Dr. Peter, we agreed that due to my history with Emma and now the extra complications of having twins, this would be my last visit with him, and Dr. Corinne Baker, a specialist in obstetrics and gynecology, would now monitor the health of both myself and the twins. I was so fortunate to have her as my specialist. What she didn't know wasn't worth knowing. Once I got over the initial shock of carrying two babies, it was game on. We needed 2 of this and 2 of that. It was an incredible feeling, but also a very emotional one. Emma would not be here to meet her new siblings. Every month, a scan was scheduled to keep a close eye on the progress of the twins. This appointment was always met with excitement and trepidation. It was a relief to know that twin 1 and twin 2 were growing as they should be, according to my due date. The reality of one twin doing better than the other in utero is common. This was always at the back of my mind. At 24 weeks gestation, we decided to find out what sex the babies were. Twin 1 was always head down and bottom up, and he was identified as a boy. Twin 2, however, was not so forthcoming in identifying his gender. Every scan, this little one was in a different position. They were determined on keeping their identity as a secret until the day of arrival. I didn't know how twin 2 was able to move around so much in the confines of my belly, so there was quite a bit of discussion about how these 2 babies were going to arrive into the world. There was the possibility of both being delivered naturally, or one naturally and one by caesarean section, or both by caesarean section. Having these frank discussions with Dr. Baker was very reassuring. I felt I was in the best hands, and really any worries I had were put to rest. My belly was beginning to protrude very quickly, and my skin felt like it was being stretched to the limit. I knew in myself that the reality of making it to full term, 40 weeks, was going to be a miracle. I was already mimicking a mother duck, that is. I wasn't walking along, I was waddling along. We were informed that the arrival of the twins from 35 weeks on encountered minimal problems, as all the major organs in the baby are developed, and the baby is literally just putting on fat and growing. 5th of March 1993. Due to Emma's death, a national campaign began to bring awareness to those that had missed out on their second rubella immunisation shot. A newspaper article was published, sharing our story to raise awareness. Otago Daily Times, Friday, 5th of March 1993. The headline read, "Mother-to-be tells of rubella danger," by Barbara Fountain. It read, Mrs. Wendy King of Concord did not know she had rubella when she became pregnant. She was one of a group of New Zealand women who missed out on rubella immunisation in the 70s, a slip that had tragic consequences. 2 years ago, Mrs. King, 28, noticed an itchy rash of spots on her neck and stomach. Co-workers thought she might have the measles. The doctor thought it was a virus. Not long afterwards, she found out she was pregnant. Her first baby, Emma, was born by caesarean section at 31 weeks after failing to thrive in the womb. Emma had rubella, German measles, and died from complications when she was 19 weeks old. Now, 2 years later, Mrs. King and her husband Neil are expecting twins. They have had time to grieve for Emma, and Mrs. King wants other women to know about the consequences of contracting rubella during pregnancy. She said she went through her first pregnancy doing everything right. I didn't smoke and I didn't drink. I had heard about rubella, but I did not know what it was. She had no idea how she contracted the virus. Emma was 840 grams when she was born. To look at her, she was perfect, but the rubella had caused a serious heart condition, cataracts in her eyes. She needed oxygen because she could not breathe properly and had to be tube-fed because she did not have the energy to suck. The Kings had Emma at home for 7 weeks during her short life. She died just hours before she was to have an operation on her eyes. The rubella immunisation program changed in the 70s, and it is likely that Mrs. King missed out on being immunised when that policy was changed. Otago Medical School researchers Dr. Charlotte Paul and Nigel Dixon found last year that changes to the immunisation policy meant that women born in the years 1965 to 1967 were much less likely to have been immunised as children than women born before or after. Dr. Paul said yesterday it was possible about a third of women aged between 25 and 27 were not immunised as children. It was important for all women, even if they had been immunised, to have their immunity checked before having children, she said. They could not be immunised once they were pregnant. Mrs. King said other people's reaction to her concerns about rubella was strange. They treat you like you're a one-off case and think it won't happen to anyone else. Even though Emma died, people don't seem to register that it was serious. She recounts the story of a close friend who became pregnant and had not checked whether or not she was immune. 9th of March 1993. It was 12:30 a.m. on 9th of March 1993 when I untangled myself from the sheets to go to the bathroom. Again. I'm certain these twins thought my bladder was a trampoline, but this time it was different. When I stepped out of bed, I thought I had lost control of my bladder. But no, my waters had broken. The twins were on their way. We had made it to 34.5 weeks gestation. I rang my midwife and she said great, but told me to go back to bed, try and rest and wait until the contractions began. She said once my contractions were 5 minutes apart, then I was to ring her again and meet her in the hospital. Well, you guessed it. How could one possibly go back to bed, rest or sleep, when my babies were starting their journey into this world? At 7:30 a.m. we were on our way to hospital. On arriving at Queen Mary Hospital, I was met by sweet Irish midwife, Mary Gamble. Ginny, my chosen midwife, had been up through the night with a complicated birth and would join us soon. At 12:30 p.m, my contractions were so strong and painful that I announced to my 2 midwives that if I did not get an epidural soon, I would find a knife and get these babies out. For any readers, just remember all pregnancies and births are different. My contractions were so painful. I got my wish. The natural way, in my experience, was overrated. The world was a better place once my epidural had kicked in. In Matthew Perry's words, could the pain be any more intense? At 7:30 p.m, I was told to start pushing. Twin 1 was head down and was always going to be the first one out. I pushed and I pushed, but Twin 1 was not in any hurry. A decision was made by the doctors to help Twin 1 move a little bit quicker as Twin 2's heart rate was going through the roof. Twin 1, Blair, was born with forceps at 7:32 p.m. He weighed 4 pounds 15 ounces. Twin 2, Regan, after having to share his space in the womb with his older brother, decided to flip around and have the whole womb to himself. The bed to myself. At last he must have been thinking. His heart rate was now normal. However, he was now lying in a transverse position and had to be pulled out feet first into the world. Regan was born at 7:38 p.m. weighing 4 pounds 11 ounces with a cleft lip and palate. Both twins needed assistance to breathe, but they were soon responding on their own. It wasn't long before I had 2 dear little boys wrapped up tightly in warm towels placed in my arms. The tears rolled down my face. I felt like the luckiest mother in the world. Twin 2, Regan's cleft lip and palate. Regan's cleft lip and palate was never picked up in the scans due to the technology available at the time. So for him to present this congenital birth defect on his arrival was a bit of a surprise to Dr. Baker, my specialist, Dr. Barry Taylor, our paediatric specialist, Ginny and Mary, the midwives, and both myself and Neil. Advancements in technology means that scans can now show pretty much every little detail while the baby is growing in utero. Any concerns are picked up earlier, so parents and physicians are prepared. With saying that, Regan's condition did not concern me one iota. All I wanted to know was how was I going to feed this darling baby. I was elated that he did not have a life-threatening condition and that he had arrived safely. We were soon to learn that modern medicine was going to right the birth defect. This was no mean feat though. Regan was a courageous, strong young man that had to go through 21 surgeries. Note: what did Regan's care look like for the next 20 years? Between dental surgeries and plastic surgeries, a total of 21 surgeries in all, meant Regan's life for the next 20 years involved many trips to the dental school. From day 2 of Regan being born, he was under the care of the dental school. Ethne McFadgen looked after Regan for the first few years of Regan's dental care. Then his care was taken over by Associate Professor Kumara De Silva in his teens. However, from 4 months of age to 21 years of age, Regan's surgeon and otolaryngologist, Dr. Jeff Robinson, was an integral part of Regan's journey under the Dunedin Public Hospital and Mercy Hospital, and Dr. Jeff will always have a special place in our heart. We were so grateful we lived in a city that had the dental school and wonderful doctors, because other parents in the surrounding Otago area had to factor in day trips or overnight stays with their little one for their appointments. Mixed emotions. It had been a massive day. I was exhausted but elated at the same time. Blair and Regan were taken up to the NICU to be monitored as they had arrived 5.5 weeks early. All their vital signs would be thoroughly checked out, which also meant they would be in their own incubator until they could both regulate their own body temperature. All I wanted to do was sleep. I had been awake since 12:30 a.m. that morning, and I was emotionally relieved and physically shattered. I will see my babies again tomorrow and find out what the plan is with Regan. One day at a time, I kept telling myself. One day at a time. The following day, I awoke with excitement and anticipation of seeing my babies. Even though I had tossed and turned with the battle damage incurred in the nether regions, this was insignificant to the little bundles of joy that were waiting upstairs in NICU. As soon as I was able, the orderly wheeled me up to the 5th floor to hold my babies. Whilst the nurses were attending to the other babies, I just sat there and took in the sight of my wee boys until the nurses were free to place them in my arms. My heart welled with joy when the nurses attending to Regan and Blair told me that when Regan became unsettled in the night, they took Blair out of his incubator and placed him in beside Regan. What happened, you ask? Regan stopped crying and calmed down immediately. His big brother could give him the comfort he needed, even though I couldn't be there. This was just another magical moment of the bond twins can have with each other. When you think about it, it isn't surprising. They had shared their home together in the womb for 34.5 weeks. It must have felt strange for them, being in a new environment and not getting a foot or an arm shoved into each other. Overnight, Blair graduated from the incubator to a cot. I held Blair first and automatically introduced him to my breast to see if he would suckle. He did. It never ceases to amaze me how their instinct is to search out the smell of their mother and move their little mouth for nutrition and comfort. After attending to Blair, I moved over towards Regan. Regan was in his incubator. He had vomited a few times in the night and had a tube inserted via his nose into his tummy so he could receive fluids. This is when the flood of emotions unexpectedly hit me. Nothing prepared me for this. I went from having a beautiful bonding session with Blair and now I was sobbing uncontrollably. There I was, staring at Regan in his incubator, but I couldn't see Regan. I could only see Emma. My mind associated the incubator with Emma. The more I tried to stop the river of tears, the worse I became. I felt the gentle hand of the head nurse Thea Levesque on my back. I said to her through the tears, "We have to stop meeting like this." You see, Thea had been the head nurse in NICU when Emma was there. "It will be okay, Wendy," she said. "It will be okay. Regan will soon look like his brother. The plastic surgeon and dental surgeon will be over today to talk about the procedures to rectify this." I turned and looked at her. Her eyes were glassy and her face was soft and kind. Little did she know that this was not the reason for my tears. I tried to stop sobbing to get the words out. "Thea," I said. "Thea, I'm not worried about Regan's cleft lip and palate. All I can see when I look in the incubator is Emma. All I see is Emma. Emma should be here. I love Regan, but I miss my girl. I just want to hold her. I just want her," I sobbed. "Oh, Wendy," she said, and tears began to stream down her face too. Talk about an emotional roller coaster ride. I had leapt from anticipation and joy to great sadness. Today I was missing my Emma and feeling guilty for momentarily feeling so happy. It was so exhausting to wrestle with being sad and happy at the same time. I didn't know at the time, but these feelings and emotions were completely normal. The brain's last experience and memory of seeing a baby in an incubator was Emma. That is why I felt sad, because it wasn't her. I'll explain this when we go into part 2 and one of the lessons. Over the next few days, it was trial and error to get Regan's feeding routine sorted and his ability to suck from a bottle. It wasn't a regular bottle. It was a Haberman bottle with a valve in between the teat and bottle. As he couldn't suck, I would squeeze a small amount of milk into his mouth and he would swallow. Feeding Regan would take up to an hour and a half, because when you were squeezing the milk into his mouth, you were also squeezing air into his mouth. If you didn't stop to wind him, air would build up inside his tummy, which caused him to projectile vomit. I have to tell you, when you did stop to wind Regan, boy, could he burp. Very impressive indeed. The days were passing by very quickly in the hospital, and a week had gone by. The boys were situated on the 5th floor of the hospital and the maternity ward was on the 2nd floor. This meant many trips backwards and forwards up to the lift for feeding times and cuddles. As Blair was thriving, it was suggested that I take Blair home and travel in each day to see Regan. That suggestion was a definite no. I was not leaving the hospital without my 2 babies. They arrived together, they were going home together. Seeing the bond the twins had between them and then separating them would not be in the best interest of Regan or my psyche. It was 3 weeks before we all went home together.